trade and industry, including the international relations ministers, will on Monday provide an update on tariff negotiations with the United States. A 30% hike on South African goods was implemented starting today. Government has since established an export support desk to cushion the blow as both countries try to reach a deal. Now, the Trade and Industry Deputy Director General, Xolelwa Mlumbi-Peter, is my guest, and she joins me now. Ms. Mlumbi-Peter, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. Understanding the tariffs and their impact on companies, I'm hoping you and I are going to have almost an ABC conversation of what these tariffs mean. So talk to us in a much simpler language. What is your understanding of how the companies are going to be affected here?
Well, the impact on the companies, Tolir, depends on the exposure of the companies to the U.S. Market, because some of the companies, you find that they are diversified and they are exporting to a number of countries. So it will depend on that. But of course, for those companies that have the biggest exposure to the U.S., then the tariff is, of course, paid by the person that is, or the company that is importing the product from South Africa, effectively. But of course, a higher tariff means that the South African companies and products may lose competitiveness in the U.S. market. And as government, we are therefore doing everything that we can to continue our engagements with the United States government so that we can find a mutually beneficial deal.
Okay, so if I were to say to you, it means that South African products are going to be much more expensive for the U.S. consumer. Would that be a fair and simpler understanding of it?
Yes, that is effectively what it means.
Okay. Before we get to the response on relief and support measures that are going to come should companies start experiencing difficulty, do you know, as we speak today, whether government has prepared some kind of package in order to rescue, or the word that is usually used is to bail out companies that will start experiencing difficulties? Do you know whether there is anything of that sort in the works?
Yes, there is, as you would have seen from the cabinet statement that was read by the minister in the presidency. There is a package that is currently being finalized, and that package has a number of elements. One, to ensure that we are able to support companies with information in terms of what are the implications of the tariffs, but also importantly, if they are looking for alternative markets, where can they find those alternative markets? And therefore, the export help desk is an element of that package. The second package is about assisting companies that are facing the high tariffs in terms of getting access to working capital. And therefore, there is finalization of that package to assist. Then, to also address the impact on jobs, we are working with the Department of Labor to ensure that we are going to tap into the various instruments that the Department of Labor has that could assist companies that are trying to ensure that they do not really lose jobs. Of course, what is going to be important is to also look at how do we stimulate domestic demand. And there are various elements that we are looking at in this regard, including government procurement to support the companies that are facing difficulties.
Beyond government procurement, how else do you stimulate domestic demand?
There are also various mechanisms, including working with Proudly SA to ensure that we give exposure and encourage South Africans to buy local, because by doing so, then we are ensuring that we are able to support the companies that are producing South Africanly produced products, and that South Africans continue to buy those. So there are various mechanisms, including, of course, encouraging companies to source locally produced products in their value chain.
Okay, so that particular discussion now that we are talking about trying to stimulate domestic demand. It basically talks to market diversification. There's been a lot of that from the mouth of the president to say, let's look to the continent, trading or increasing trade with the continent. Let's look to European markets. What do you know at the moment where we are actively clinching deals? We're literally signing to say in the next quarter, we are going to be sending X amount of South African products to you.
One, we already have existing markets where we have already negotiated trade agreements that we have not really been fully optimizing as South Africa. Therefore, we are sharing through the export help desk the information about where readily available markets exist. We already have, as you have referred to, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and we see a lot of increase in South African products that are being exported to the new markets in the continent. In fact, under the AfCFTA, we've seen that already between February as well as July this year, our exports have risen to above 1.2 billion rands. So already there are companies that are taking advantage of the new market. We already have an existing market in the Southern African Development Community, so SADC, and that has been implemented since 2016. So a lot of our companies have already been tapping into that market. We also have the Southern Africa Customs Union, the 5 countries, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, Eswatini, and of course ourselves. That is also a readily available market for our products.
Yeah. Okay.
Then, of course, beyond the continent, we have the European market that is also readily available, the UK market where we have preferential access. We also have the Generalized System of Preference Agreement, which is a unilateral agreement that also countries like Japan have also granted to both our agriculture as well as industrial products. So we have a number of markets that are readily available that our companies can take advantage of. Of course, beyond the formalized, if I can put it that way, trade agreements. We are also working with a number of our trading partners. Ministers in their briefing on Monday also referred to work that we are doing with countries in ASEAN in terms of trade and investment packages, where we are negotiating, working with the Department of Agriculture to also negotiate the relevant protocols that will allow our agricultural products to receive market access. China is also one of those markets that we're looking at, India and so forth. So right across the world, including the countries in the Gulf, we are actively seeking new market access opportunities.
Yeah. Let's talk about the most sensitive area that comes with these increased tariffs, and that is job security. People are going to be extremely panicked right now. What is the realistic prognosis here about just how many jobs could be affected? I know you don't want to touch on numbers, but we probably need to frame this sensitively, but with a particular figure in mind. Is there something that you are working with at the moment?
Well, as in terms of job numbers, it depends also on a number of factors, as we have indicated, including whether the companies are able to tap into other markets as well. So far, the indication is around 30,000, but of course, as we said, there's lots of work that is being undertaken now to really look at the real impact, speaking to a number of especially the affected companies. But that figure may be exaggerated depending on whether we are able to quickly assist the companies to get new markets, including the issue of also ensuring that we are able to promote domestic demand.
Yeah. Just run us through the sectors of the economy that are going to be immediately affected here. Which are these? Just last night, I had a conversation with the Minister of Minerals, and I think there is a fair amount of conclusion in his head that there isn't really going to be much impact on minerals. That space is somewhat protected or not affected. Let me put it that way, not affected. Which sectors are going to be immediately affected here?
So the minister is right. Minerals, pharmaceuticals, energy products have been exempted from the reciprocal tariffs. So they continue to enjoy duty-free access into the US. So in totality, 35% of our exports to the US are currently exempted from the reciprocal tariffs.
Before you
Then in
move
terms
on,
of the,
before you move on from that, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Before you move on from the minerals, do you know why the minerals sector is exempted from these reciprocal tariffs? What has been, what is the understanding? What is this administration saying around these?
well, clearly for us is the fact that the minerals are a critical input into US industries. And in fact, the irony of all of this is that if you look at the biggest contributor to our trade surplus, which is the biggest justification used by the US government as to why they are imposing these reciprocal tariffs, the biggest contributing factor to the surplus that we enjoy with the US is arising out of effectively our critical minerals, which are the products that the US requires for their own industrialization, which is why these minerals have been exempted from the reciprocal tariffs. Another contributor to our trade surplus is agricultural products, which are effectively counter-seasonal. So we don't produce, because we are in different hemispheres, we don't produce the products at the same time. So as a result, again, our agricultural exports really close the gap in terms of meeting consumer demands in the US. And therefore, if you really look and drill down on our trade with the US is not competitive. It is rather complementary because we really supply the products that the US needs in order for them to either meet consumer demands or to industrialize. So that is really the justification as to why the minerals are exempted.
Wow, very interesting indeed. Finally, just out of curiosity, when we talk minerals, the political space, political speak, they will talk about a finished product. Beneficiation is the word that's usually used. Talk to us about the state of these minerals as they reach the American market. Are these finished goods or they go there in their raw state?
Most of them, Toli, go in their raw state, which is a critical issue that we are raising with all our trading partners across the board. That the critical issue that we want to advance as South Africa is to ensure that we are able to add value in our minerals here in South Africa so that we can create the necessary jobs and also ensure that we are not locked into the lower end of the supply chains as just a supplier of raw materials that actually spare industrialization of others. We also want to industrialize. And this is the conversation that we are also having with the US to say, as we talk about this trade and investment deal, what will be important is to ensure that when it comes to critical minerals, it's really about a cooperation that enables the value addition of our critical minerals here in South Africa.
A very simple conversation, exactly what I was hoping for. Thank you so much for educating us. Xolelwa Mlumbi-Peter is the Deputy Director General within the Trade Industry and Competition Department.